History is not a collection of random accidents. It is a grand rhythmic machine, governed by structural forces so powerful that even the most brilliant leaders are often reduced to mere passengers. In the late 5th century BC, a Greek historian named Thucydides observed a phenomenon that would haunt every civilization to follow. He wrote, "It was the rise of Athens and the fear that this inspired in Sparta that made war inevitable." Today, we call this the Thucydides Trap. It is the most dangerous pattern in the history of the world. Think of it as a tectonic shift. Two massive plates, the established power and the rising challenger, slowly grinding against one another. For a long time, there is only pressure, a silent, invisible accumulation of stress. But eventually, the friction becomes unbearable. The crust snaps. The result is a geopolitical earthquake that redraws the map of the human experience. Over the past 500 years, this structural stress has occurred 16 times. In 12 of those cases, the result was a catastrophic systemic war. 12 out of 16. These are not just numbers. They are the epitaphs of empires. From the Habsburgs challenging the French to the rise of Imperial Germany against Great Britain, the script is almost always the same. Welcome to Macro History. Today, we are analyzing the countdown. We are going beyond the headlines of trade wars and diplomatic spats to look at the cold, hard gears of the Thucydides Trap. Why is war a rational choice for irrational actors? Why does the status quo become a death sentence for a newcomer? And most importantly, are we currently living in the final years of the 4/16 exception? To understand our future, we must first dissect the architecture of the collision. At the heart of the Thucydides Trap lies a psychological duality. The ruling power S paranoia and the rising power S hubris. The ruling power, the hegemon, has built the system. They wrote the rules, they control the currency, and they dominate the seas. To them, the current world order is synonymous with peace and stability. Any attempt to change it is seen not just as a challenge, but as an act of aggression. They suffer from the syndrome of decay. Every minor setback, every lost contract, and every rising tariff feels like a mortal wound to their exceptionalism. Then there is the rising power. They are the new kid on the block, fueled by a sense of entitlement and historical grievance. They look at the rules written by the old guard and see a cage designed to keep them small. They believe their time has come. Their growth is not just economic. It is a spiritual reclamation of their rightful place in the sun. When a rising power begins to believe its own narrative of destiny, and a ruling power begins to believe its own narrative of decline, the space for diplomacy vanishes. Communication becomes a weapon. Compromise is viewed as weakness. In this environment, even a small, unrelated incident, a sparked ship in a distant sea, a failed assassination, or a trade embargo can serve as the catalyst. In the original Thucydides Trap, it wasn't a direct dispute between Sparta and Athens that started the fire. It was a minor conflict in a backwater colony called Epidamnus, but because the structural stress was already at its peak, that tiny spark ignited a 30-year war that destroyed the golden age of Greece. The tragedy of the trap is that both sides can be led by people who genuinely want peace. Yet they find themselves making decisions that make war a mathematical certainty. It is the logic of the prisoner's dilemma played out with nuclear-armed states. If I don't strike now, while I still have the advantage, the other side will grow so strong that I will lose everything later. This is the window of opportunity paradox. For the hegemon, the window is closing. For the challenger, the window is opening. The moment those two windows overlap is the most dangerous moment in human history. In the next section, we will travel back to the most bloody case studies of this trap, from the fields of Peloponnesus to the trenches of the Somme, to see how the gears of history crushed the hopes of millions. We will see how the naval race of 1914 mirrors the AI race of today, and why the first shot is rarely the first cause. The architecture of collision and case studies in BLO.2 understand the 12 out of 16 statistic. We must look at the scars of those who failed to escape the trap. History is a graveyard of empires that believed they were the exception. Let us return to the original sin, the Peloponnesian War. In the mid-5th century BC, Sparta was the undisputed hegemon of the Greek world. It was a land power, conservative, and stable. Then came Athens. Athens was a rising maritime empire, fueled by democratic fervor and a commercial explosion. As Athens built its long walls and expanded its navy, Sparta watched with growing dread. To the Spartans, the Athenian growth was not just progress, it was an existential threat to the Peloponnesian way of life. Every new Athenian colony was a dagger pointed at Sparta's heart. The tragedy: neither side truly wanted a total war that would leave Greece vulnerable to Persia. They spent years in diplomatic posturing, but the structural stress was too high. When a minor dispute broke out between Corinth and Corcyra, Athens felt compelled to intervene to protect its naval dominance. The result was a 30-year suicide pact. By the time the war ended, the golden age of Pericles was ash, and the cradle of Western civilization was broken. Thucydides' lesson was clear: the specific triggers of war are often trivial. The cause is the shift in the balance of power. Fast forward nearly 2,400 years to the dawn of the 20th century. The stage was larger, but the script was identical. Great Britain was the global hegemon. It ruled the waves, controlled the world's financial heart in London, and possessed an empire upon which the sun never set. Then came Imperial Germany. Following its unification in 1871, Germany's economic engine became the most powerful in Europe. But Germany felt encircled. They looked at the British Empire and saw a wall. Kaiser Wilhelm II famously demanded Germany's place in the sun. The trigger was the naval race. When Germany began building a high seas fleet capable of challenging the Royal Navy, the British psyche snapped. For Britain, naval supremacy was not a luxury. It was a survival requirement for an island nation. For Germany, a great navy was the hallmark of a great power. By 1914, the window of opportunity was closing for Britain and opening for Germany. The assassination of an archduke in Sarajevo regional event in the Balkans served as the spark, because the Thucydides trap was fully set. A localized crisis dragged the entire world into a mechanized slaughterhouse. 10 million died because two empires couldn't navigate a shift in the global hierarchy. But history does offer a glimmer of hope. The 4 out of 16 exceptions, the most famous exception, is the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. This was the ultimate Thucydides trap. A rising Soviet Union challenged the post-World War to American hegemony. All the markers were there: ideological mirror matching, proxy wars, and an arms race that consumed trillions of dollars. Why did it not end in a 13th total war? The answer is as chilling as it is instructive: nuclear weapons, for the first time in human history. The cost of war became higher than the cost of submission or stalemate. Mutually assured destruction acted as a structural brake on the Thucydides trap. When both the hegemon and the challenger know that the first shot leads to the extinction of their own species, the rationality of war disappears. However, we must ask, is the nuclear peace a permanent solution or just a temporary delay? In the 21st century, the trap has evolved. We are no longer just looking at naval races or territorial disputes, we are looking at a total competition that spans from the depths of the ocean floor to the silicon architecture of our brains. The challenger today is not a regional power like Sparta or a continental power like Imperial Germany. It is a civilization state that has returned to claim its historical primacy. In the next section, we move from the history books to the real-time satellite feeds of today. We will analyze the Thucydides line, the moment when the lines of American and Chinese power intersect, and why the next 10 years are the most dangerous decade in the history of macro history. We will look at the first island chain, the semiconductor chokehold of Taiwan, and the demographic time bomb that might force a rising power to act before its window closes forever. We have arrived. The single most consequential great power rivalry in human history is no longer a theory. It's our lived reality. On one side, the United States, the reigning global power since 1945, the architect of our financial system, and the guardian of the liberal international order. On the other, China, a civilization state that has just completed the fastest economic and military expansion ever recorded. This is the 21st century tectonic shift, and we are standing right on the fault line. To grasp the sheer scale of this collision, we need to look at what I call the Thucydides line. In 1980, China's entire economy was less than 10% the size of America's. But by 2020, measured in purchasing power parity, China had already surpassed the US to become the world's largest economy. This isn't just a line on a graph, this is the point of no return. In Washington's eyes, this isn't just growth, it's an encroachment. Beijing's rise is seen not as a global trade success story, but as a systemic threat to the primacy of the dollar and the security of the Pacific. Conversely, Beijing looks at the American Navy in the South China Sea and does see freedom of navigation. It sees a colonial-era containment strategy designed to cut off its economic lifeline. This brings us to the most dangerous concept in geopolitics, the strategic dilemma. Every single move one side makes to feel more secure makes the other side feel critically threatened. When the US forges alliances like AUKUS with the UK and Australia, it calls it defensive. China sees it as a digital and physical wall meant to suffocate its rise. When China builds and militarizes artificial islands, it says it's protecting its sovereign trade routes. The US sees a hostile power trying to seize control of the world's most vital maritime artery. Every step is a reaction to the last, and an action that demands the next. But this isn't your great-grandfather's rivalry. Unlike the Anglo-German naval race of 1914, this 21st century trap is multidimensional. We are now witnessing the silicon Thucydides trap. In the past, steel and coal were the metrics of power. Today, it's the nanometer, the entire global economy. Every advanced weapon from F-35 fighter jets to DF-17 hypersonic missiles runs on high-end semiconductors, and an unbelievable 90% of those chips are manufactured on a single island, Taiwan. Taiwan has become the Sarajevo of the 21st century. It is the ultimate flashpoint where history, identity, and high-tech manufacturing collide in the most explosive way imaginable. For the United States, Taiwan is the linchpin of the first island chain. If Taiwan falls under Beijing's control, the US Navy loses its grip on the Western Pacific. Its credibility as a security guarantor for Japan and South Korea evaporates overnight. The American century would end in a single afternoon. For China, Taiwan is the unfinished business of its civil war, the final piece in its puzzle of great rejuvenation. Without it, China feels its sovereignty is incomplete and its coastlines are permanently vulnerable to a foreign blockade. But there is a new, darker variable in this countdown that Thucydides never had to consider: the demographic time bomb. Both the hegemon and the challenger are aging, but China is aging faster than it's getting rich. Its workforce is shrinking, its social costs are skyrocketing. In the grand sweep of history, a rising power that senses its window of opportunity is about to close due to internal decay is the most dangerous actor of all. This is called peaking power syndrome. If Beijing believes its relative power will peak around 2030 and then decline, the rational, though terrifying choice might be to force a resolution while they are at their maximum strength. Meanwhile, the US is grappling with its own internal fragmentation. A global power that is divided at home is often tempted to seek unity by creating an external enemy. The countdown is accelerating. This friction is no longer just about tariffs on soy or steel. It's about who defines the rules of artificial intelligence, who controls the world's reserve currency, and who dictates the morality of the 22nd century. The wars are already being fought in the shadows of the financial system and the deep reaches of cyberspace. In our next video, we will expose these invisible front lines before we reach the final, critical question. How do we defy history and become the exception to the rule? Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. While the world watches for the flash of a missile or the roar of a jet engine, the Thucydides trap is already being sprung in the silence of the global nervous system. We are no longer in a pre-war phase. We are in a state of kinetic delay. In macro history, before the first physical trench is dug, the foundations of the enemy's power must be eroded. This is the war of the invisible front lines. The first front line is the financial hegemony. For 80 years, the US dollar has been the exorbitant privilege. It is the oxygen of global trade. By controlling the SWIFT system, the United States can effectively delete a nation from the global economy without firing a single bullet. To a rising challenger like China, this is an intolerable vulnerability. This is why we see the aggressive push for the digital yuan, ECNY, and the expansion of the BRICS alliance. They are not just creating a currency, they are building an escape hatch from the dollar-denominated world. When the challenger no longer fears the hegemon sanctions, the deterrent for physical war evaporates. The second front line is cyber and cognitive sovereignty. In the Peloponnesian War, messengers took days to deliver news. Today, perception is altered in milliseconds. The Thucydides trap is being fought in the algorithms of TikTok and the firewalls of Silicon Valley. If you can convince the hegemon's population that their system is failing, or convince the challenger's youth that their rise is a lie, you win the war before it begins. This is subthreshold warfare. It is the constant probing of power grids, the theft of F-35 blueprints, and the manipulation of social cohesion. In the eyes of a macro historian, these are not isolated hacking incidents. They are the artillery preparation of the 21st century. The third, and perhaps most existential frontline, is the resource chokehold. History shows that when a rising power is denied the raw materials it needs to survive, it is forced into a use it or lose it dilemma. In 1941, it was the US oil embargo that forced Imperial Japan to strike Pearl Harbor. Japan knew it couldn't win a long war, but it also knew it couldn't survive without oil. Today, the oil is high-end logic chips and rare earth elements. If the US successfully de-risks or decouples to the point where China is cut off from the global AI evolution, Beijing faces the same choice as Tokyo in 1941. Do they accept a permanent status as a second-tier power? Or do they roll the iron dice while they still have the military capability to disrupt the order? This leads us to the escalation ladder. Every time a new export control is signed in Washington or a new naval exercise is conducted in the Taiwan Strait, we climb a rung. The problem with the Thucydides trap is that once you reach the top of the ladder, the only way off is to jump or to fall. The countdown is no longer about decades. It is about decision windows. We are watching a game of 5D chess where the board is the entire planet, and the pieces are moved by leaders who are increasingly trapped by their own domestic nationalist rhetoric. In our final section, we will address the ultimate question: how do we become the 17th case and the 5th exception? We will look at the guardrails of peace and the sobering reality of what a failure to escape the trap would actually look like in an era of hypersonic and autonomous warfare. Is the 12/16 rule a law of nature or a choice of man? We stand at the precipice of the 17th case. In macro history, we often treat the rise and fall of empires as if they were governed by the laws of physics inevitable, cold, and impersonal. But as we reach the end of the countdown, we must confront a sobering truth. The Thucydides trap is not a cage of iron. It is a cage of our own making. If the 12/16 rule holds, the next decade will not be defined by a new Cold War, but by a great reset of the global order through kinetic violence. What would that look like in the 21st century? Unlike the trenches of WWI or the carrier battles of World War II, a conflict between today's superpowers would be a hyperwar. It would begin in space, with the blinding of GPS and communication satellites. It would paralyze cities as power grids are decapitated by districts, and it would culminate in the God's eye view of autonomous drone swarms and hypersonic missiles that move too fast for human reaction. The cost of the 13th war would not just be the end of an empire, but potentially the end of the global supply chain that keeps 8 billion people alive. So, how do we become the 5th exception? How does macro history record a grand synthesis instead of a grand collision? History suggests 3 guardrails that have saved us before. 1. The nuclear anchor. As long as mutually assured destruction remains a mathematical certainty, the rationality of total war is broken. However, as we develop low-yield tactical nukes and AI-controlled command systems, this anchor is fraying. We must re-sanctify the taboo of the atom. 2. Economic entanglement. In 1914, trade was high, but it was shallow. Today, our economies are deeply integrated. The smartphone in your pocket is a product of both American design and Chinese assembly. When you go to war with your best customer and your primary factory, you are committing economic suicide. The cost of decoupling is the greatest peace treaty ever written. 3. The common enemy in the past. Empires only united against a greater threat. Today, we have them: climate collapse, pandemics, and the uncontrolled risks of artificial general intelligence. If the hegemon and the challenger can pivot their total competition into a total race to solve these global crises, the Thucydides trap can be transcended. But let us be blunt, the countdown is real. The structural stress between the United States and China is at an all-time high. The window of opportunity for a peaceful transition is narrowing every year. The lesson of Thucydides is not that war is inevitable, but that fear makes it feel inevitable. When we stop seeing a rising power as a threat and start seeing it as a variable, And when a rising power stops seeing the ruling power as a wall and starts seeing it as a partner in stability, the trap snaps shut empty. We are the authors of the 17th case. Whether the historians of the 22nd century look back at our era as a dark age of hubris or a golden age of wisdom depends on the decisions made in the next 3,650 days. The clock is ticking, the gears are turning, and the world is watching. This is macro history. Thank you for walking through the countdown with us.